Chosen ones, someone is planning to kick you out. They are plotting, scheming, hiding behind masks of smiles and fake concern. But this message is not for them. It's for you. You know it. Deep down, you've felt it. The tension in the room. The conversations that stop when you walk in. The fake laughter. The sideways glances. You're not imagining it, they are threatened by your presence. Because you don't play their games. Because you see through the illusion. Because you were never meant to fit in. You were born to stand out. Comment 777 right now if your spirit recognizes this truth. This is a message for the chosen ones, the ones who were never meant to blend into this world, the ones marked by fire, by resilience, by divine protection. And if you're new here, subscribe to join thousands of other awakened souls rising through the darkness. You're not alone anymore. They want you gone because your light is disrupting their comfort. Your clarity exposes their chaos. You're like a mirror they can't escape. And every time they look at you, they see what they're not willing to face in themselves. They fear what they cannot control. So they whisper, they scheme, they plot to push you out, to replace you, to erase you, but they will fail. Because this is not their story. This is yours. Chosen one, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your shrinking. You don't owe anyone comfort at the expense of your calling. What they don't realize is that every time they try to push you out, they're actually pushing you forward, into the next level, into your elevation, into divine positioning. You weren't built to crumble. You were built to rise. Comment 777 if you're done apologizing for your presence. They may lie on your name, try to twist your words, make you the villain in their fantasy. But chosen one, let them talk. Because while they're busy crafting stories, you're out here living truth. Your power is not in proving them wrong. Your power is in staying rooted, grounded, unshaken. Let them stare, let them plot, let them gather. Because what they don't understand is you are not alone in this. You are divinely covered. Every weapon formed against you will backfire. Every trap they set will collapse beneath them. You are the one who breaks patterns. You are the one who sees the unseen. You are the one who carries ancient wisdom in your blood. Subscribe to this channel to align with your true soul family. Thousands of chosen ones are rising, and you are part of this movement. They want you gone because you carry something they cannot imitate. Authority. Not given by man, but stamped by the divine. You walk into a room and shift the energy without saying a word. That's not arrogance. That's anointing. Chosen one, you're not for everyone. You never were. Stop trying to win approval from people who were sent to distract you. Stop trying to explain your light to those still addicted to darkness. Stop fighting for space in places you've already outgrown. Comment 777 if you know it's time to walk away from what no longer aligns. They think they can kick you out and go back to business as usual, but what they don't know is this. When you leave, the blessing leaves with you, the protection leaves with you, the insight, the favor, the glow. You were the covering, and when they push you out, the space becomes exposed. That's why everything falls apart after you're gone. Chosen ones are not replaceable. They are repositioned. You are being shifted, not shoved, uplifted, not rejected, exalted, not expelled. So, let them play their game, let them gossip, let them smile to your face, and curse you behind closed doors. Your hands stay clean, your energy stays pure, and the Most High will handle the rest. Don't forget to like this video if this word is confirmation for what you've been sensing. Comment 777 to seal this energy in your spirit, and subscribe not for numbers, but to stay aligned with thousands of awakened souls who are chosen, just like you. They're planning, they're plotting, but God is positioning. They see you walking through storms they thought would destroy you, and it unsettles them. You don't complain. You don't seek validation. You just move quietly, deliberately, faithfully. That silence, that strength, that endurance, it makes them uneasy. Because they've never seen someone carry so much pain and still walk with purpose. They can't understand it, so they attack it. What they don't realize is the very thing they're trying to destroy is the reason the atmosphere hasn't collapsed on them yet. You're not just surviving, you're sustaining everything around you, and that's why they want you gone. Because deep down, they know they could never handle what you carry. They smile in your face while secretly praying for your downfall. But what they don't understand is, your rise isn't optional, it's divine. There's no scheme, no slander, no setup that can override a supernatural assignment. You were chosen before you were even formed. So, their plans? Already outdated. Your presence convicts them. Your peace exposes their chaos. Your discipline confronts their laziness. And instead of rising with you, they'd rather try to drag you down. But chosen ones don't fall, they shift. And every attempt to bury you becomes soil for your next level. They see your elevation, and it burns them. Not because you're loud about it, but because they know they've done everything to block it, and it still happened. Comment 777 if you felt this resistance in silence. They don't want to talk about how you kept giving when they only took. How you showed up with love while they moved in jealousy. How you tried to build bridges and they only handed you matches. But your heart, it's still intact. Your spirit, untouched. Your mission, unstoppable. Because every time they underestimated you, heaven increased its investment in you. You are not here to seek permission. You are not here to fit their mold. You are not here to follow the rules of a system that was never built for your kind of power. You are the rule breaker, the curse breaker, the generational shift. They're plotting to kick you out, but what they didn't account for was the legacy that walks with you. Every step you take carries the weight of ancestors who prayed for this moment. You are the answer to battles they fought and never lived to see resolved. That's why your presence is disruptive, because it's redemptive. They don't just envy you, they remember something eternal when they look at you. You awaken their guilt, their forgotten purpose, their ignored calling, and instead of returning to the path, they attack the mirror. But you didn't come to fight. You came to free. And if that makes you a target, so be it. Comment 777 if you understand. You're not just being resisted, you're being revealed. They want your silence, but your voice is fire. They want your retreat, but your footsteps are thunder. They want your doubt, but your belief in yourself is louder than their lies. You are the disruption they cannot contain, and every move you make rattles the cages of their comfort. You don't match their pace because you were never meant to walk beside them. You were built to go ahead. You were designed to see before others could. You carry blueprint energy, divine architecture, vision that breaks ceilings. That's why they label you difficult, delusional, intense, because you dare to see what doesn't exist yet. They can't box in someone sent to break walls. They can't dismiss someone carrying dimensions they've never accessed. They're not just planning to kick you out, they're trying to control what they fear. And what they fear is a future where you don't need them at all, Where you rise so high, they become invisible from where you stand. And that future, it's already unfolding. Hit the like button if this message is unlocking something deep within you. When the light enters a room, it doesn't ask for permission, it simply exposes. That's what you do. You walk in, and the temperature shifts, the mood changes, the masks fall. You weren't sent to blend in, you were sent to break the spell. And the spell is cracking. They're nervous now, because your silence is too calm. Your presence is too steady. Your eyes see too much. You are a walking truth serum, and liars can't survive too long near you. They either run or they reveal themselves. Either way, you win. They fear the moment you finally step into full power. They fear the day you stop dimming your light. They fear the hour you decide that you've wasted enough time entertaining empty rooms and small minds. And that hour is here. Comment 777 if you feel that shift happening right now. You've been quiet long enough. You've been loyal to dysfunction long enough. You've been shrinking in spaces that don't deserve your presence long enough. Now, you rise, not because they said you could, not because the door was opened for you, but because you realized you are the door. You carry favor on your footsteps, glory in your shadow, strategy in your stillness. Let them watch, let them whisper, let them wonder how you're still standing. Let them try to figure out why nothing is working against you. Chosen one, stop explaining the fire. Start walking in it. Subscribe to this channel now to stay aligned with those who get it. We're not just talking about survival. We're stepping into supernatural positioning, where the ones who were cast aside become the cornerstone. You are not being removed. You are being remembered by heaven. This moment you're in, it's not punishment, it's preparation. They think they're getting rid of you, but God is rerouting you. Elevation always comes disguised as exclusion. They think they've excluded you from the circle, but you're being pulled into the throne room. Keep your energy clean, keep your vision sharp, keep your heart soft, because while they're working against you, heaven is working through you. More is coming. They counted you out because they couldn't count high enough. They tried to shrink you to match their comfort zones, but every time they put a limit on you, heaven tore another ceiling off your destiny. The problem is, they thought you were like them, desperate for acceptance, willing to settle for scraps, begging for a seat at tables you were meant to own. But you're not that version anymore. You've outgrown the script they wrote for you, and now they're scrambling to rewrite the narrative. But it's too late. You've already stepped into the truth. They're threatened because you're not reacting. You're not defending. You're not pleading your case. And silence from someone powerful, that's not weakness. That's precision. They don't realize you're not ignoring them. You're watching the collapse from a higher level. The drama can't touch you when you're operating from elevation. And that's the part they can't stand, that you've learned how to fly without their wind. Comment 777 if you're done being pulled back into battles beneath your level. They set traps hoping you'd get caught in the same cycles. Cycles of bitterness, of revenge, of proving yourself. But you saw through it. You didn't fall for the bait. You let them dig, and now the pit is waiting for them, not for you. That's what happens when you walk in wisdom instead of impulse. That's what happens when you let discernment do the talking. Because chosen ones don't fight for attention. They fight for alignment. They never expected you to thrive after being cut off. They didn't think you'd flourish when they stopped clapping. But the applause never fueled you. You've been powered by prophecy. You've been walking by vision, not validation. And now that you've stopped chasing approval, your glow is undeniable. That glow isn't arrogance, it's alignment. They miss the version of you who needed them, the version who stayed quiet to keep the peace, the version who gave without boundaries, loved without wisdom, served without being seen. But that version died in the fire they set. And the one that rose? Fireproof. Comment 777 if your rebirth has made them uncomfortable. They can't figure out why the isolation didn't break you, why the lies didn't derail you, why the rejection didn't ruin you. It's because your foundation wasn't built on people, it was built on promise. And promises made by heaven don't expire under pressure. They grow stronger in silence. They grow deeper in darkness. They're watching you now, and they don't know whether to clap or compete, because your existence confronts them. Your discipline reveals their excuses. Your growth challenges their comfort. Your purpose wakes up the parts of them they've ignored. You are their trigger because you are their reminder. A reminder of what they could have been had they chosen purpose over popularity. Had they chosen growth over gossip. Had they chosen truth over comfort. But they didn't. You did. And now the divide is permanent. They can't follow you where you're going, not because they're not allowed, but because they won't do the work. They'd rather critique your calling than answer their own. Let them. Hit the like button if this is piercing your soul right now. They studied your weaknesses, but they forgot your God. They memorized your flaws, but they ignored your grace. They knew your mistakes, but they never understood your resilience. And that's why their strategy will always fail. Because when you walk with divine backing, you don't have to explain yourself. You just have to keep walking. They think you're acting different. You are, because healed you talks less and listens more. Healed you observes before engaging. Healed you sets boundaries without apology. Healed you knows what costs peace and chooses not to pay. Comment 777 if you've become allergic to environments that dishonor your soul. You've spent too many years making others comfortable while you suffered in silence. Now, your glow-up isn't just external, it's spiritual. You're glowing because you've been pruned. You're glowing because you've been refined. You're glowing because what didn't kill you became the oil that now covers you. They can't handle your oil. They didn't pay the price for it. They weren't in the pit with you. They weren't in the furnace. They weren't there when you cried alone, screamed alone, broke down alone, and then rebuilt alone. But they want the shine without the storm. They want your stage without your scars. They want your peace without your pruning. They want the crown, but not the crushing. Chosen one, don't let them gaslight your growth. You didn't get here by accident. You didn't survive by chance. You didn't evolve by convenience. You bled for this. You died for this. And now, you live differently for it. Subscribe now to stay connected to a tribe that understands this frequency. This space isn't about hype, it's about alignment. It's about confirmation. It's about the kind of clarity that makes you walk away from what you once begged to stay in. They think you've changed. You have. Not because you're bitter, but because you're awake. And when a chosen one wakes up, the whole room shifts. They'll say you're too much. You're not. They just got too used to you playing small. They'll say you switched up. You did. You switched from being drained to being discerning. You switched from being available to being aligned. You switched from being manipulated to being in motion. And now that you've moved, they feel the shift. But instead of adjusting, they're accusing, because it's easier to call you selfish than to admit they were always taking. It's easier to call you distant than to face how they mishandled closeness. It's easier to villainize your boundaries than to confront their entitlement. Let them. You're not responsible for how they process your evolution, only for how you protect it. They saw you in your quiet season and assumed it was weakness. But what they didn't see was the rebuilding, the rewiring, the sharpening. They didn't see the battles you fought when no one was clapping. They didn't see the nights you cried into the floor and still got up before the sun. They didn't see the breaking that made room for the becoming. So now that you're rising, they're confused, offended even, because your elevation is not the kind that asks for permission. It just shows up and shifts everything. They call it arrogance because you no longer explain yourself. They call it pride because your yes is no longer automatic. They call it fake because they don't recognize healed energy. But the truth is, they never knew the real you, only the version you performed to keep peace. That version is gone, and peace has a new definition now. Comment 777 if you're done sacrificing your truth for temporary approval. They don't understand how you can still be soft and unshakable, gentle but immovable, loving but unavailable to anything beneath your calling. It's because you've learned the balance. You've learned that protecting your peace doesn't mean becoming cold, it means becoming wise. They expect you to return to the version of you who tolerated their mess, who stayed silent through disrespect, who made excuses for their absence and carried the weight of the whole room just to keep the lights on. But you're not their light switch anymore. They have to generate their own glow now. And that absence they feel, that's the space where you used to shrink. They're not grieving you. They're grieving the control they had. They're grieving the access they abused. They're grieving the version of you who made life easy for them at your own expense. But you're not grieving anything. You're reclaiming. You're restoring. You're rebuilding in silence while their noise gets louder, because that's all they have left. Noise. Hit like if you've learned how to move in power without performance. They try to measure you with their metrics. How many followers? How much applause? How many invitations? But your impact isn't in numbers. It's in the shifts that happen when you enter a space. It's in the clarity people feel after a conversation with you. It's in the freedom your presence activates. It's in the truth that breaks out when you speak truth that they've been running from for years. You are the proof that healing exists. You are the embodiment of what happens when pain meets purpose. You are what they didn't expect. That's why they want you out. Not because you did something wrong, but because your existence is a living confrontation to their comfort. You didn't expose them with your words. You exposed them by not needing them anymore. Comment 777 if that release felt like a resurrection. They want you out because your stillness is disruptive, because your boundaries are loud, because your joy, after everything you've survived, feels unfair to those who expected your ruin. But let them sit with it. Let them feel the contrast between what they assumed and what God preserved. They thought the fire would kill you, but it baptized you. They thought the betrayal would paralyze you, but it made you master your movement. They thought the exile would break your identity, but it introduced you to the version of you that was always hidden under survival mode. Now that you're no longer surviving, your presence is dangerous. Not because you seek power, but because you carry peace that can't be manipulated. They can't buy it, they can't fake it, they can't replicate it, so they resent it, and they mask that resentment with gossip, with distance, with concern. But concern, without accountability, is just control. And you've stopped being controlled. That's why they want you gone. Subscribe to this channel to stay connected to voices that recognize your depth. They thought keeping you close would keep them covered, but now they realize your presence was the only reason they weren't exposed sooner. You were grace, walking, covering their dysfunction with compassion, shielding their immaturity with maturity, holding space for their chaos without letting it become yours. But they mistook your covering for compliance. They assumed your mercy meant blindness, so they kept pushing, kept testing, kept crossing lines, until one day you stopped reminding them of your worth and just walked away. Now, they're planning your removal, but God already authored your release. There's a difference between being pushed out and being pulled higher. Comment 777 if you're done asking for what you already carry. You've stopped chasing clarity from people committed to misunderstanding you. You've stopped begging for space in rooms that shrink your voice. You've stopped waiting for recognition from those who benefit from pretending not to see you. Because now you understand, visibility is not the same as value. Some things are hidden because they're not ready. Other things are hidden because they're too valuable to be exposed. You are the latter. They couldn't handle you when you were dimmed. They won't survive you fully lit. And that's why the plot to kick you out is so desperate. It's not strategy. It's panic. They're sensing what's coming. They feel the glory resting on your next season. They know they can't stop it, so they try to control the narrative. But it's too late for that. Your life is a scroll written by something greater. They can't edit what they didn't author. Keep your head up. Keep your spirit steady, because the exit they're preparing for you is just an entrance to something far beyond their reach. They thought you needed their circle, but you were never looking for belonging. You were looking for alignment. And when you realized the two aren't always the same, the game changed. You stopped forcing connection where there was only convenience. You stopped mistaking proximity for loyalty. And you stopped confusing shared history with shared destiny. Because just because someone walked with you doesn't mean they were meant to finish the race with you. That's why you felt the distance long before it was physical. That's why your spirit started pulling away even when your body was still showing up. You could sense the shift. You could feel the hidden energy, the subtle jabs disguised as jokes, the small betrayals dressed in politeness. You knew something was off, but you waited. You gave grace, you gave time, and they used it to sharpen their knives. Comment 777 if you've outgrown relationships built on roles, not respect. They were comfortable with you as long as you played small, as long as you stayed in the role they assigned you. The fixer, the listener, the forgiver, the one who absorbed everyone's chaos without ever expressing your own. But the moment you dared to evolve, the moment you dared to need boundaries, they called it attitude. They called it ego. But it wasn't ego. It was emergence. It was the real you standing up after years of being buried under expectations. And they couldn't handle that, because when you stop dancing for approval, the people who built their power on your compliance lose their rhythm. That's why they want you gone. Because your very existence now demands accountability. Not just for how they treated you, but for how little they showed up when it really mattered. When you were quiet, they called you cold. When you were vocal, they called you aggressive. When you pulled back, they said you changed. But the truth is, you just healed. And healed people don't tolerate dysfunction dressed as friendship. They don't entertain manipulation disguised as loyalty. They don't stick around for conversations filled with low-key envy and passive-aggressive competition. You stopped playing the role. Now they're rewriting the script without you. Let them. Hit the like button if you've chosen peace over performance. There was a time you would have fought to stay, explained yourself over and over, overextended to keep the connection alive. But now you know that no bond is worth betraying your spirit. And you've finally made peace with being misunderstood. Because when you walk in purpose, misunderstanding becomes part of the path. They'll talk, they'll twist your intentions, they'll rewrite the history, but they can't replicate your impact. They can't undo the seeds you planted with your presence. They can't reverse the growth you sparked just by existing in truth. Comment 777 if you've chosen truth over comfort, no matter the cost. You're not bitter, you're not broken, you're just not bending anymore. And that's what confuses them. That after everything, you're still kind, still grounded, still shining. But what they don't see is the fire it took to make your heart soft without making it weak. That's a miracle. That's power. That's divine resilience. And that's why they're intimidated, because you don't move from ego, you move from alignment. You're not chasing clout. You're not performing for applause. You're rooted in something eternal. And that scares people who've built their identity on external validation. They're scrambling now, trying to discredit what they can't duplicate, trying to control a narrative that's already slipping through their fingers. Because no matter what they say, people can feel the shift. They can sense the elevation, they can see the favor, and they know it's not something they can sabotage. Subscribe now if you know your story is too sacred to be edited by the insecure. They're running out of ways to explain why you're still rising, why you're still glowing, why, after all the shade, all the sabotage, all the silence, they still feel your impact. It's because your power never came from popularity. It came from purpose. And purpose doesn't die in darkness. It develops there. So while they were mocking, you were molding. While they were whispering, you were working. While they were plotting, you were preparing. And now the glow is undeniable. But they won't say it. They won't admit they feel it. Because pride won't let them honor what jealousy keeps trying to deny. Let it go. Let them go. Because you've got rooms to enter that they're not even qualified to witness. Comment 777 if you've made peace with walking alone until alignment shows up. They tried to make you question your worth, tried to confuse your discernment, tried to twist your clarity into cruelty. But what they forgot is that chosen ones don't stay confused for long. You might wobble, you might weep, you might wrestle with the doubt, but you always return to the knowing, that deep, unshakable, undeniable knowing that you were never meant to stay where dishonor is the norm. So you left. Not with anger, not with noise, but with dignity. And now your distance is louder than your presence ever was. They feel it in the silence. They feel it in the way peace returned once you stepped away. They feel it in the way nothing quite hits the same since your energy exited the equation. They thought you were replaceable. They're realizing now you were foundational. They saw you grieving and mistook it for defeat. They thought your silence meant surrender. They assumed your isolation was punishment. But what they didn't know is that solitude was sacred, that silence was healing, that grief was fertilizing your next season. You weren't breaking down, you were breaking through. And now, the fruit is starting to show. They feel the shift, they sense the momentum, and it's making them uncomfortable, because they were counting on you staying buried. They were hoping you wouldn't come back from that heartbreak, from that betrayal, from that season of silence. But chosen ones don't stay in tombs. They resurrect. You've been resurrected. And now, your presence doesn't just speak, it echoes. Comment 777 if you've ever had to rebuild in silence while they watched in judgment. You weren't just healing, you were unlearning. All the false beliefs, all the small thinking, all the generational noise, all the programs that taught you love means overextending. That value means pleasing. That loyalty means staying too long. You had to unlearn so much just to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And now that you've remembered, there's no going back. Not to the small talk, not to the fake peace, not to the one-sided loyalty, not to the contracts built on unspoken resentment. You are not available for anything that disturbs your clarity. And clarity now is your compass, not emotion, not nostalgia, not obligation. Clarity. They thought you were being cold when you became clear. But clarity isn't cruelty, it's calling. And yours is getting louder. That's why they want you out. Because they don't want to admit the connection was built on your confusion. They don't want to face the truth that the moment you got clear, the dynamic cracked. Let it crack. Let it collapse. Because things built on falsehood are not worth preserving. Comment 777. If you've learned to bless the endings that come without closure, you no longer need permission to protect your peace. You no longer need a panel to validate your process. You no longer need to apologize for your discernment. You don't explain boundaries anymore, you embody them. And that embodiment has become a mirror for everyone around you. Some are inspired, others are offended. Either way, you're no longer responsible for how your healing is received. They'll call it a phase. They'll call it self-righteousness. They'll say you're not the same. And they're right. Because once you've seen the truth, pretending becomes painful. Once you've touched alignment, tolerating chaos becomes impossible. Once you've sat with God in the dark, attention from people in the light feels empty. You didn't just change, you evolved. You didn't just shift, you remembered. You didn't just walk away, you ascended. And now, they want you back, but only the version of you that made them comfortable. That version no longer exists. Subscribe to this channel if you've ever been punished for choosing yourself. They thought you'd beg to stay. They thought you'd bend for inclusion. They thought you'd compromise to be chosen. But what they didn't realize is you already are chosen by God, by purpose, by the divine strategy that brought you to this very moment. They think they're kicking you out of something, but what they don't realize is nothing they built could ever hold you. You don't need their table when you were born to build your own. You don't need their yes when heaven already said go. You don't need their access when favor has already found you. Let them remove you. Let them replace you. Let them reject you, because all they're doing is accelerating what was already written. Comment 777 if you've seen rejection turn into redirection more than once. You've learned to stop mourning what was never real. The friendships held together by shared wounds, the relationships fueled by trauma bonding, the spaces where you were celebrated for staying small. You see it now for what it was. And that sight, that insight, that's what they hate. Because people who benefit from your blindness will always fear your clarity. And your clarity is non-negotiable now. You see who's for you. You see who's using you. You see who claps when you're low and goes silent when you rise. You see it all, and you still choose grace. But grace doesn't mean access. Grace doesn't mean invitation. Grace doesn't mean repetition. You can forgive without reconnecting. You can release without returning. You can bless without rebuilding. Because healing doesn't mean circling back. Sometimes healing means closing the door with no desire to reopen it. And when you close that door, you don't slam it, you seal, with peace, with clarity, with completion. They'll say you changed, but they won't say you finally started telling the truth. Keep your eyes forward. The doors ahead weren't built by hands that fear your growth. They were carved by seasons that demanded your strength, by pain that refined your voice, by prayers whispered when no one else was listening, by faith that stood when everything else fell. You're not being removed, you're being refined. They noticed your absence but pretended it didn't matter. They felt the void but acted like it was expected. They whispered among themselves, rewriting the ending to a story they never authored. But deep down, they know you were the glue, the anchor, the one holding peace in place, even while drowning in pressure. And now that you're gone, the whole thing is unraveling faster than they can cover it. Because when the foundation walks away, the structure doesn't stand long. They underestimated your presence because you never demanded attention. You never needed applause to validate your impact. You just showed up, consistent, faithful, silent in your strength. And that silence was mistaken for insignificance until you left. Now, everything echoes where you used to be. Comment 777 if your exit created a shift they can't ignore. You weren't loud, but you were light. You weren't forceful, but you were fire. You weren't flashy, but you were faithful. And they never learned how to value that, because they were looking for noise, not energy. They were looking for status, not substance. They were measuring presence in decibels, not depth. But depth doesn't brag. Depth doesn't beg. Depth simply becomes undeniable. And now you are undeniable. Because even in absence, your presence is louder than their projections. Even in distance, your name still carries weight they pretend not to feel. Even when they delete you from the frame, the story doesn't hold without your chapter, and they know it. That's why they want to discredit you. Not because you failed them, but because you left them with no more excuses. You leaving forced them to meet themselves. And that mirror is not kind. That mirror exposes what they could no longer hide behind your love, your patience, your spiritual labor. Comment 777 if your departure taught them what your words never could. They were comfortable as long as you kept carrying what they wouldn't acknowledge, as long as you kept forgiving what they never apologized for, as long as you kept holding space for dysfunction dressed up as loyalty. But then something snapped, and it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, like a door closing in a house where the walls have already cracked. You just didn't show up one day, didn't explain, didn't plead, didn't argue. You just let it end. And endings like that, they echo forever. Subscribe now if your silence has spoken louder than your explanations ever did. You're not the same. And that's the problem. Not because you've become arrogant, but because you've become aware. And awareness changes everything. Once you see who someone really is, no amount of memories can reattach the mask. And they're still wearing masks, still performing, still pretending their world isn't colder now that you've stepped out. But pretending doesn't change presence. And yours? It lingers. In the ideas they stole, in the phrases they mimic, in the dynamics they're trying to recreate without the source. But you were the source. You were the reason it all worked. And they know it. That's why they watch from the shadows. That's why they scan your every move but pretend they've moved on. Because no matter how much they distance themselves from your name, they still orbit your energy. Comment 777 if you've ever felt your presence haunt the places you outgrew. They thought they were building without you. But all they've built is noise, surface, hype, a shell of what was once rooted in your presence. Because you weren't just a participant, you were a covering. You were the unseen force holding things together while everyone else took credit. And now the cracks are showing. Now the leaks are visible. Now the collapse is inevitable. But you're not looking back, not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but because when you've tasted purpose, you no longer beg for proximity. Purpose is not about being invited in. It's about knowing when you've outgrown the room. And you've outgrown it. You've outgrown the gossip, the jealousy, the small talk disguised as community. You've outgrown the rooms that only had space for your silence but never your story. You've outgrown every chair that required you to sit in someone else's shadow just to be accepted. Comment 777 if you've stopped asking for a seat at tables you were never meant to eat at. They feel the shift, and they're uncomfortable. Not because you've become dangerous, but because you've become unavailable to their control. They don't miss you. They miss the access. They miss the influence. They miss the ability to tap into your insight without doing the work. Because you were their shortcut to healing, to truth, to transformation. And they never admitted it. But now that you're gone, they're exposed, uncovered, back at the starting line. And no matter how loudly they deny it, their lives are echoing the truth of your absence. Subscribe now to stay in alignment with voices that don't shrink your power. You're not being dramatic. You're not overthinking. You're just finally listening to your body, to your intuition, to your spirit, to the still small voice that whispered, "Leave." And when you listened, the noise got louder. Because silence exposes sound. Stillness reveals chaos. Distance reveals motives. And, now that you've stepped back, the volume of their deception is deafening. Let it be. You don't have to defend the truth. Truth defends itself. And when you walk in truth, your steps become fire to those hiding in lies. Comment 777 if your clarity has caused more confrontation than your confusion ever did. They want to know what you're doing now, where you're going, what's next, but they don't really want to support it. They want to compete with it, control it, co-opt it. But your vision isn't up for discussion. It's protected now, guarded now, wrapped in purpose so deep, only alignment can find it. Only integrity can touch it. Only those who come with clean hands and real love can walk beside it. They sensed your breakthrough before you ever spoke it. They saw it in the way your posture changed, in the way your eyes no longer searched for approval, in the way your boundaries arrived before your explanations. And instead of celebrating the evolution, they started strategizing the exit. Not theirs, yours. Because when people can't grow with you, they try to remove you. You became a threat the moment you stopped needing their permission. A threat the moment you stopped playing small to protect their insecurities. A threat the moment your glow stopped asking for validation. And what they couldn't control, they tried to cancel. But chosen ones don't get cancelled. They get crowned. Comment 777 if you've ever watched people shift on you the moment you shifted into purpose. They didn't expect you to become the version of yourself that you are now. The version that no longer absorbs dysfunction. The version that no longer carries other people's responsibilities like their spiritual assignments. The version that no longer folds to guilt-tripping or gaslighting. You used to feel bad for saying no. Now you feel peace. You used to over-explain your boundaries. Now you don't say a word. You used to shrink when they were uncomfortable. Now you let them sit in it. Because healing taught you this. You're not responsible for how others react to your growth. You're only responsible for how you steward it. And you've become a master at stewardship. They're watching now, and they don't recognize you. Good. You weren't created to be recognizable to those who only saw your brokenness. You weren't built to be palatable to people who needed you to stay in pain for them to feel powerful. You weren't made to be relatable to those who refuse to confront their own shadow. So stop explaining. Stop softening your shine. Stop inviting people into rooms they didn't help you build. Comment 777 if you've released the version of you they were comfortable controlling. They don't miss you. They miss the benefits, the insight, the discernment, the calming energy you brought into every room, the spiritual weight you carried so well they forgot it was even heavy. They thought peace was the norm because you made it look easy. They thought emotional regulation was default because you never exploded. They thought maturity was automatic because you never retaliated. But what they didn't realize is you were doing spiritual work for everyone in the room. And now that you're no longer holding the line, chaos is creeping in. Confusion is multiplying. The balance is off. Because the pillar left quietly and everything started leaning. Subscribe to this channel if you've ever been the one holding it all together without being seen. They expected you to collapse when they withdrew. They thought your light was powered by their presence. They thought you'd come crawling back when the doors closed. But you didn't crawl. You climbed. You built. You prayed. You healed. You multiplied. Because when favor is on your life, closed doors become altars. And you've learned to worship in the hallway. They can't understand how you're still rising. After the sabotage, still glowing after the slander, still winning after being walked out on. But they never understood your anointing wasn't based on their applause. Your elevation wasn't contingent on their support. Your calling wasn't tied to their comfort. And that's what scares them most. You're unshaken, untouched, unbothered. Because when you're assigned, you don't compete, you carry. Comment 777 if your favor increased the moment you released what was draining you. They said you were too much, but only after they realized they couldn't extract from you anymore. Too intense, once your discernment stopped letting things slide. Too distant, once your spirit stopped tolerating dysfunction. Too sensitive, once your intuition started calling things out before they manifested. But those weren't criticisms. They were confirmations. Confirmations that your spirit has matured beyond the manipulation. That your heart no longer confuses effort with alignment. That your soul has finally rested in the truth. It's not your job to stay where you're only needed for your energy. You're not here to be used. You're here to be sent. And where you're going, access is restricted. Only purpose can unlock the doors ahead. Only honor can stay in the room. Only truth can walk beside you. Let them talk. Let them twist the story. Let them pretend they never needed you. Because their performance will fade, but your presence never did. Comment 777 if your silence has exposed what your words never could. They don't get to decide what happens next. They don't get to write the conclusion to a book they only skimmed through. They don't get to label your story when they were never present in your wilderness. They saw the harvest, not the heartbreak. They saw the platform, not the process. They saw the oil, but never the crushing. So their opinions? Irrelevant. You don't owe them a comeback story. You owe yourself peace. And peace isn't loud. Peace isn't performance. Peace doesn't prove anything, it simply exists. And now you exist in peace. And that's what's triggering them. because they thought chaos was your home. They thought dysfunction was your resting place. But peace is your new standard. Alignment is your new language. And purpose is your new posture. They studied your silence like it was strategy. They watched your every move, thinking it was a tactic, a performance, a mask. But what they failed to realize is you weren't planning a comeback. You were healing. You weren't preparing revenge. You were remembering. Remembering who you were before the betrayal, before the disappointment, before you gave away pieces of yourself just to be tolerated. And once you remembered, you became unstoppable. Not because you got louder, but because you got rooted. Not because you fought harder, but because you stopped fighting battles you never started. Not because you tried to prove them wrong, but because you had nothing left to prove. They've never seen this version of you before, and that's what terrifies them. Comment 777 if you've ever been feared just for being fully awake. They were prepared for your pain, but they weren't prepared for your power. They were ready to comfort your breakdown, but they weren't ready to witness your breakthrough. They were familiar with the broken you, the doubting you, the second-guessing you. But this you, the one who no longer walks into rooms needing to be understood, the one who speaks without shrinking, sees without explaining, discerns without debating. This version is unfamiliar. This version doesn't wait to be chosen. This version doesn't beg to be believed. This version walks in with clarity, and clarity unsettles anything built on confusion. So now, they're plotting not because you're dangerous, but because they've lost the ability to manipulate you. And when control is lost, false loyalty turns to fear. They didn't expect to lose access. Not like this. Not without a fight. Not without a conversation. But when peace enters, conversations end, cycles close, rooms clear. Because elevation isn't always loud. Sometimes it just leaves. Comment 777 if you've exited quietly and still shook the room. They tried to box you in, tried to define you by your past, tried to tether your future to their limitations, but they couldn't hold what heaven had already released. You were never meant to be understood by people still operating in survival mode. You were never meant to be accepted by systems that depend on hierarchy, performance, control. You were never meant to stay in spaces that require you to forget yourself in order to be included. You are remembrance in human form. You are what happens when someone chooses truth over tradition, purpose over performance, healing over habit. And now your presence breaks cycles just by existing. Now your peace convicts instead of comforts. Now your name carries a weight they weren't prepared to respect. So they call you distant, detached, changed, and they're right. But what they don't say out loud is, you became everything they claimed they wanted to be, but without needing them. Subscribe now if you've outgrown expectations you never agreed to carry. They can't define you anymore.